video, we'll be making gluten-free hot water gingerbread, topped with French vanilla ice cream and homemade salted caramel. I was shocked to find out that a lot of people don't know what hot water gingerbread is. This is one of my family recipes that I converted to gluten-free. Though the salted caramel, that was me. Hot water gingerbread is a super moist and super flavorful gingerbread cake that is best served warm from the oven and then topped with vanilla ice cream that melts, and it's so good. But the best thing about this recipe is that it's so fast and easy to make. Part of the reason I wanted to add it to my holidays course is because I was finding myself making this recipe over and over again at Christmas time because you can easily whip it together while you're making dinner. Super delicious, super easy. Let's get started. Hey everyone, before we go any further, I just want to let you know that if you want the written recipe with notes and substitutions and printable PDFs, then you should go sign up for my free lessons at glutenfreebakingcourses.com/free-lessons. The recipe you're about to make is a little taste test of the holidays course. If you want to make the most amazing gluten-free classic holiday recipes, then this is the course for you. It includes this hot water gingerbread as well as Cranberry-Orange-Pistachio Scones, herb and garlic pull-apart rolls, maple syrup pumpkin pie, classic shortbread cookies, ginger sparklers, gingerbread men, and a chocolate Swiss roll with candy cane cream. All links are in the description below. All right, back to the lesson. Let's quickly talk about the equipment you'll need for this recipe, which is really nothing fancy. It's pretty much the same kind of stuff you would use for like banana bread or muffins. I like to bake my gingerbread in a 9x9 square pan. Typically I cut it into little square pieces, so that's why I like this shape, but you could also use a 9-inch cake pan if that's what you have on hand. Also, I have already greased this pan with butter. You could also spray it with cooking spray if that's what you use. But I like to use butter for everything I can. Then you'll want a medium to large mixing bowl. You'll also want to have 2 other small to medium bowls handy. I have my whisk and spatula, and I'm going to be using my electric hand mixer today. If you don't have a hand mixer, you can just whisk this up by hand, but this makes it really quick and easy. Side note, I got this wireless mixer set last Black Friday and I am in love with it. It's a little KitchenAid mixer. It is so awesome to be able to mix wherever you want. I can mix here, over here, back here, and I don't need to plug it in. If you're interested, I will link it for you below. Before we mix everything together, go preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit and go put your kettle on because we're gonna need hot water for our hot water gingerbread. Now we're going to mix together all of our dry ingredients. This is one of those recipes that's super simple. We mix our dry, we mix our wet, and then we combine them. For the gluten-free ingredients, we have 3 gluten-free flours and 2 starches. Let's start with our rice flour. I like to use both brown and white rice flour so we get a little bit of that super neutral flour and a little bit of that whole grain flour. So we have a 1/2 cup of brown rice flour and a 1/2 cup of white rice flour. Rice flour provides structure for the gingerbread while also having a neutral taste. Then we have a 1/4 cup of almond flour. Almond flour adds moisture and also keeps the texture nice and light. If you need to make this nut-free though, you can use gluten-free oat flour or sorghum flour instead. Then we have 2 different starches which will help to keep the texture nice and light. We have a 1/4 cup of potato starch. Potato starch will help make it light and fluffy. And a 1/4 cup of tapioca starch. The tapioca starch will add a bit of elasticity, which will help to hold the structure together. Then we have a 1/2 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Xanthan gum is one of our key binders in this recipe, along with the egg that we'll add later, which will help to thicken and stabilize the batter. For leavening, we have 1 teaspoon of baking soda. That's soda, not powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. For that delicious gingerbread flavor, we have 3 spices, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves. All right, let's whisk it up. those spices smell so good. For filming purposes, because I only have one big clear bowl, I'm gonna transfer my dry ingredients into a smaller bowl and mix the wet ingredients in here, but you're welcome to just mix your liquid ingredients in another big bowl. I'm gonna dump them in here. This bowl is so heavy. Please excuse my weird little hand. Gotta work on my grip strength. All right, let's go grab the rest of our ingredients. Now we're going to mix together our liquid ingredients, though there is a specific order that I like to do this in. First, we are going to cream our butter. I have 1/3 cup, or about 76 grams of unsalted butter, which is softened. I left mine out on the countertop overnight and it's nice and soft now, but if you forgot and you're pulling it out of the fridge, make sure you soften it in the microwave first. Add my butter to the bowl, and I'm just going to cream the butter until it's nice and smooth. And now we're going to add our 1/3 cup of sugar. And we're going to cream the butter and the sugar together. And as I mentioned, you're welcome to just do this by hand, though the beaters do make it quite a bit faster. I'm just gonna scrape down the sides. And now we're going to add our 1 egg. It's ideal if your egg is at room temperature so it doesn't harden any of the butter back up. So again, if you didn't plan ahead and pull your egg out ahead of time, you can just let it sit in a bowl of warm water for a few minutes before you add it. In its shell, of course. Don't break it into the warm water because that would be a mess. Normally I crack it into a separate bowl, but I'm gonna live on the edge today. I mean, it's not really living on the edge, but.
I'm gonna crack on the edge.
And then we're going to beat the egg in until smooth. We're gonna set this bowl to the side for 1 quick second while we prepare our molasses and water. So let's swap them out. Now, if you're a tea nerd like me and you have one of these kettles that you can boil it to a specific temperature, I normally boil mine to about 195 degrees Fahrenheit so that it's just under a boil. But this is why I said to boil your kettle when you preheat your oven so that it has cooled down slightly and it's not freshly boiled. So I have 2/3 cup of molasses, and I'll just show you in case you have any doubts. I'm using the Crosby's Fancy Molasses that says gluten-free on it. Though I haven't really come across molasses that isn't gluten-free, but just in case you're wondering, throw that back in my very organized drawer. So I'm going to add my 2/3 cup of molasses. Slow as molasses. Let's speed that up. Now you'll have to excuse me, this is not gonna look very pretty on camera, but I always just pour my hot water into the same measuring cup as the molasses to get some of that molasses from the sides. No molasses wasted. So I'm going to measure 2/3 cup of hot water into the measuring cup. And we'll pour that in. Stir up the bottom a little bit. Whoops. Splashing molasses all over. Okay, well. I'm so graceful. I don't know if other people are like this baking. Like whenever I watch a Bake Off and they don't like scrape every little bit out of the bowl, it makes me cringe. Maybe I have a problem, I don't know. Anyway, I'll pour that in. Why am I like this? And I'm just gonna whisk this up to dissolve the molasses.
Why wouldn't you use the beaters for this?
Why are you taking my joy? Just need
What is this stack of... Who are you?
Hey, I don't have a stool to put it on, so what am I? Move your stuff out of the way. Now we're in the home stretch. We just need to mix it all together. I'm going to use my beaters and I'm going to alternate adding dry and liquid while I mix. So I'm going to add a little bit of the dry mixture, about 1/3 of it, and start mixing. And then a little bit of the molasses for about 1/3. And I just have my mixer on the very lowest setting. Again, you can just do it by hand if you like. make sure that there's no flour stuck to the bottom that hasn't been combined. And this batter should be quite wet. If you've done some gluten-free baking, you may have read some things online about letting your batter sit on the countertop so that it has a better texture, but this batter has so much moisture in it that's not necessary, and you don't want to leave it sitting out because you may lose some of that oven spring. We're just going to scrape this into our prepared pan, which is the part that I have been dreading doing on video because this bowl is so heavy, I can't find a graceful way of doing it. So enjoy watching me struggle. Okay. I guess that wasn't too bad, she says with a screaming bicep. Gonna get every last little bit, no batter wasted. Now just use your spatula to smooth it out in the pan as best you can. And now we're going to bake it for 35 to 40 minutes. Just so you know, I pretty much always bake it for the full 40 minutes in my oven, but as ovens really do vary, you'll have to keep an eye on it the first time you make it. And I don't use the convection setting, but if you do, you might need to check it after 30 minutes. Time for your kitchen to smell amazing. While it's baking, a word from our sponsor, me. You may have noticed that I'm wearing this stunningly gorgeous apron. Robin, where did you get that apron? And how can I get one? Shop.glutenfreebakingcourses.com. These aprons were designed by yours truly for you truly. These aprons are 100% linen, so they're soft and comfortable, and they're also breathable so that you don't sweat to death in your hot kitchen. It also comes in a classic apron. Ta-da! If you like baking with your partner, you can have a cute little matching set.
Husband.
Yeah, well, but what if they don't have a husband specifically?
But I'm your husband.
Okay, I will say it for the world. So if you like baking with your husband, or with your friends, or your kids, look how cute these are. They're perfect for all of your holiday baking adventures. Be sure to order your apron or apron set as soon as possible so you can get it in time for the holiday season. Shop.glutenfreebakingcourses.com. And now it looks like my hot water gingerbread is ready to come out of the oven. Our hot water gingerbread is fresh from the oven. It's done baking. As I mentioned, I baked it for 40 minutes. If you're wondering if it's done or not, it should have pulled away from the edges of the pan, and it should just gently spring back when you touch the top. Now, I like to let it cool in the pan for 10 minutes before transferring it to a cooling rack. Because this is such a moist cake, I find that it's very delicate, so I like to just give it a few minutes to settle before I transfer it. Now that it's been 10 minutes, we're going to transfer our gingerbread to a cooling rack. Now it's probably overkill, but I like to just cut around the edges of the pan with a knife just to ensure there wasn't any sticking. So I'm just gonna put my cooling rack on top and flip it over, and then remove your pan. Whoop. Gorgeous. Here we go. Now you're welcome to serve your gingerbread warm from the oven, but I'm gonna let mine cool down while I make my salted caramel. I know that a lot of people think that making caramel is really daunting, but I promise it's not actually that difficult. As long as you follow the instructions carefully and you have everything prepared ahead of time, it's actually quite simple. Let me show you what I have prepared and then we'll get started making the caramel. I have already measured out my 1 cup of granulated sugar, a half a cup of heavy cream that I have warmed up, and then I have 6 tablespoons or about 90 grams of butter cubed that is room temperature. Now, because this is salted caramel, in addition to the salted butter, I also have a half teaspoon of salt. If you were to use unsalted butter, you would probably need at least a 3/4 teaspoon. You can always start with a half teaspoon and add more if you need more. So those are all the ingredients. There's just 4 things to make the salted caramel. And then I have my saucepan. I like to use a stainless steel saucepan, but if you're finding that your caramel has a tendency to burn, you might want to use a pot with a thicker bottom. I also have a silicone spatula and a whisk. You could also use a wooden spoon, but I find that the spatula works really well. I have my splatter screen handy here because when you make caramel, it does have a tendency to splatter. So if you're not going to use a splatter screen, then I would definitely have gloves or something like that to protect your hands from the hot, burning caramel. And finally, I have the container that I'm going to transfer my caramel into. I'm going to put mine into a mason jar. You could also just transfer it to a bowl if you're not sure if your container is heat safe. But a mason jar is a really great thing to store your caramel in the fridge. Let's get started. I'm going to turn my pan on a medium heat. Keep in mind that I'm making my caramel over gas, but if you're using an electric stovetop, timing may vary. One other thing is that I always have my phone or my timer handy, as timing is quite important when making caramel. So let's add our sugar to the pan. And we're going to consistently stir the sugar until it melts. As you can see, it's already starting to caramelize, so my pan was a little bit hot, so I just turned it down. So now it's at a medium-low heat. The stainless steel pans really do heat up quickly. And you really can't multitask when you're making caramel. It only takes about 5 minutes to make, but you have to be active the entire time. So make sure you don't have something else on the stove or something else in the oven, and that you can be completely attentive to it. So we're just going to keep stirring the sugar, and you'll see it eventually melts down and turns into this light caramel colored liquid. That's what we're looking for. We've still got a little ways to go. And once our sugar is ready, I usually pull it off the heat for a second to slow down the caramelization. And also have your splatter screen ready for the moment you add your butter, because it will start bubbling like crazy when you add it. As you can see, we're getting closer here as far as the color goes. It's that kind of pale caramel color, but not all of the sugar is melted yet, so it's not ready quite yet. Now I'm just gonna pull this off the heat for a second because it's starting to brown up, but not all the sugar is melted yet. And the goal is to get all of that sugar melted without it turning too dark of a color. You can even use your whisk to try to break it up a little bit. All right, now that it is melted, I'm gonna leave it off the heat for a second, and I'm gonna add my butter. As I mentioned, it's going to splatter. So grab your whisk and whisk it in. Once it's smooth, you're gonna set your timer for 1 minute, and you're gonna let it cook on the cooktop for 1 minute without stirring it. And I'm just gonna let it bubble. All right, so now that it's been a minute, I'm going to give it a little whisk. And we're going to whisk in our cream. Again, it's going to splatter. Try to whisk as best you can, but you can put your splatter screen over if you need to. Once you have it whisked, you're going to set your timer again for 1 minute. Let it cook without touching it. All right, now that it's been 1 minute, you're gonna turn your stovetop off, remove it from the heat, and you're going to whisk in your salt. Now I'm going to very carefully pour my caramel. And there you go. There's your salted caramel. I would recommend waiting until your caramel is warm rather than hot before using it. And just be aware that it will thicken as it cools down to room temperature. Once it's cool enough, you can taste it for the salt level. And this caramel stores really well in the fridge, so just make sure you seal the container. It should be good for a couple of weeks. It may firm up in the fridge, so make sure that you warm it up before you use it so you can drizzle it on top of your ice cream. So we've made our gingerbread. We've made our salted caramel. Now all we need to do is eat it. It should still be warm when you cut it, but if you made it ahead of time, then just reheat it in the microwave, like I did. So I have my warm gingerbread. I'm gonna do a hefty scoop of vanilla ice cream. Plop that on top. And then we're gonna do a little salted caramel drizzle. Ready? Okay. Don't be shy with the caramel. And then we eat it. So you've got the hot gingerbread, the cold ice cream, and then the luscious caramel. It is unreal. Like, I just don't think it gets better than that. The only thing that would make it better is my delicious Twinings Christmas tea. Cake and tea and Christmas tree and all of the Christmas things. I love it. It truly is the most wonderful time of the year. I hope you enjoyed this free lesson. In case you missed it earlier, if you want the written recipe with notes, substitutions, and printable PDFs, then you should check out my free lessons. And if you want to get your hands on one of these gorgeous holiday aprons, then be sure to check out my shop. All links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, happy holidays, and I'll see you next time. And they're also breathable so you don't sweat to death in your hot oven. I was so confident. We don't have a child to put it on. We didn't really want to like post an ad being like, can I have a child that I can film and put on the internet? Should we put it on the dog? Put it on a pillow.
I will make all the cookies in this apron. What are we doing?
I don't know.